This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Well, just like a true professional, Bruce, I did not download a bio on you. So I'm just going to make shit up. How's that?
Sure, let's get it. That'd probably be better.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but for all 10 of our listeners, we'll put our best foot forward here. No shoes, no service. Here we go. So today, Be One Change One podcast, we have Bruce Borgos, who I'm happy to say is a new friend of mine, and he's also a very new USA Today bestseller. His latest book, The Blue Horse, and I'll even hold it up here in front of my camera real quick. Really good. Would you classify this as a thriller, a mystery, a crime drama? What genre do you think that fits into the best?
I think it's a hybrid, really, of all three of those. Yeah. It says on the front, it's a Porterbeck mystery.
It does, yeah.
And it has elements of mystery, certainly, but it has those other elements as well. So I think it crosses those genres.
Sweet. Well, I can tell you that I enjoyed it, and I would encourage our listeners, especially if you're a fan of, maybe anything from Westerns all the way up through, I don't know, the Bosch series or anything like that. Michael Connelly and some of the things that he wrote and,
sure.
Those crime thrillers. I was able to see elements of all that in there. And then obviously we talked about Craig Johnson, the Longmire series, and how that was a great influence on you. And anyways, it was a really entertaining book with a lot of elements that I really related to just from living out here in the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah, where does this work? But I was just out of curiosity, Bruce, where does this podcast find you? Where are you at right now?
I'm in Las Vegas, and I was just going to say that, following up on Roscoe's point, you guys as fighter pilots and being in the Southwest a lot would probably appreciate the second book, which in the series, which is called Shades of Mercy. And a lot of that book has to do with our latest drone technology.
Mm.
Interesting. And I've seen that on the shelf. But I'm curious now. I'm going to have to go look that up.
I'm going to read it.
I've talked to a lot of people recently about some of the new, like the CCA and the next generation air defense and the AI drones. And then there's the MQ-20 that's just coming around the corner. Mm-hmm. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I hadn't heard of that one.
Yeah, well, the MQ-20 is kind of it's an upgraded version of the was it the MQ-9?
Right. The Reaper.
The Reaper.
Yeah.
And it's a turbine engine versus a prop engine. Mm-hmm. And this is all open source stuff. And I'm not exactly sure of all the capabilities of it yet, but I got some homework to do because I'm working on another idea where I want to show a dichotomy between old school and new school. I want to take like an old, I don't know, I want to paint that black and white picture, sort of like you see in like Star Wars, where there's this very clear cut line between good and bad and new and old, and you got the earthy tones versus the black and whites of the Death Star and stuff I appreciate when those two things are in it's just it's super evident contrast of each other, and then somehow they meet. And anyways, one of the things that I wanted to start the conversation here with was you're relatively new into the publishing business. Now, you had a couple of self-published novels, right?
I did. Like a lot of authors starting out now. There's a whole world of publishing opportunities out there, and especially self-publishing. anybody can write a book and put it out there. It's been made pretty easy to do, and good that it has, because it is how a lot of people like me get to test the waters and really determine if this is something that we might be good enough at. And that's kind of how I used self-publishing. And I did my first book in 2016, my second book in 2018, and both of those were kind of a proof of concept for me to just tell me and allow me to learn enough along the way, to the point where I said, okay, this is all well and good, but self-publishing has its own challenges. The primary one is that you have to be really good at marketing to be successful, and I'm not. It's not my skill set. So for me, some people go on in self-publishing and continue to do that, and they prefer it, and they're successful. Most authors are not, because it's a very big sea, and you're in there with a lot of other fish, and it's tough to get noticed. But like I said, it was proof of concept for me, and I was able to really look at my experience there and make a decision about trying to get self-published, or trying to get traditionally published, which I eventually did in 2020. Or at least I got my contract in 2020. And my first book with that publisher came out in 2023.
Well, there's CAS already. There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Just I'll let you go ahead, because I know you're probably lined up.
No,
got the questions lined up.
So, Bruce, talk to what I would be interested to know is just in that process of, like, how did you even start to think about writing, and then when you did and you decided, hey, I'm going to try this and I'm going to self-publish a book, like, was that scary? Was that difficult? Did you have to find mentors? Was there somebody that kind of helped you in that process along the way? Like, how did all of that come together for you?
Yeah, those
because I'm assuming you were doing, you're self-publishing, right? So you've got a job, you're doing, the daily grind with that. So what was it that made you go, hey, I'm going to try this, and then eventually make that pivot?
Circumstances, Cass, really dictated the direction that I took. I had always been interested in writing. I had written, for fun all the way back as far as high school. Did some writing in college, a little bit thereafter. But like you said, I had a real job every day.
Yeah.
And that occupied all of my time for the most part, to the point where, when I would come home from work and thought about, I should really get working on this story that I want to write. That was tough, man, because you just put in 8 or 10 hours on the computer already at work. And the prospect of doing that for another few hours was daunting sometimes. So my first book, for me to get it done, took well over 10 years from concept to turning it out. And at that time, and again, and then mostly that was because I didn't put in regular, consistent time on it. I walked away for long periods, which again is a very common thing. And then I got to the point in 2015 where some things started to happen in the news here that were related to the story I had been writing. And I realized this is the opportunity for me. It's topical. People know about it. It might bring in some readers. So I kind of rushed to finish it. Because of my work situation, I didn't have the time to invest into trying to get traditionally published. And I knew that process would require a lot of patience and a lot of time. I could self-publish really quickly. So I got that in May of 2016, I think. And that was good, like I said, for a lot of reasons. But that's kind of how I got into made the decision to self-publish, and kind of what led me eventually to the traditional publishing world.
Okay. Yeah, and I get the idea, or maybe you said you weren't very consistent in maybe having a set schedule, every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, something like that. But I would say that you were very consistent and even showed a lot of resiliency in the fact that you took 10 years. Like for 10 years, you stayed at this, right? And the reason I bring that up is I think a lot of times we talk about consistency a lot in the podcast and the importance of consistency.
Yeah.
And dude, you're not going to see the result right away, right?
No.
Like consistency is a labor of love.
Yep.
Where you're often not going to see the result until almost the end game, right? And then boom, there's a finished product. There's where you achieve the result by being disciplined and consistent in whatever it is you're trying to do. So
yeah, I think that's a very key point. I was always in love with the process of writing, not necessarily what might come after. And I think that's essential because I know a lot of people who've tried to get into writing and seem to be so caught up in the idea of what might follow that they kind of lose sight of really what's important. Because before you can do anything, you have to finish something, and you have to have something that people are going to want to read, at least in your mind. And to get there almost requires that you abandon notions of fame and fortune. And, like I said, just being in love with the process enough so that you'll, even if you're only doing it every few weeks or come back to it after a couple months, you do come back. And because it is a goal that you want to attain, just finishing that. When I first started writing my first book, Holding Fire, I didn't even allow myself to dream about this being published or people, in mass reading it. I just thought that was just putting the cart way before the horse.
Yeah, well, what I love you say there, what you said there is really you were always focused on the process, particularly not the outcome, right?
Right.
And we've talked about that on the podcast several times too, the importance of focus on the process, focus on where you're at, do those things correctly, like dive into that and don't worry about what's on the backside of it, right? Just focus on the process. That's what's going to get you through. So that's a great example of that.
Well, and I think that's if you talk to any published authors, I think you'll hear that 95% or more of the time, the same story.
Yeah.
Is that you just you can't. It's easy to get swallowed up. Like last week, I heard for the first time the Blue Horse makes it onto the USA Today bestseller list. Okay, that is a great thing. I was so happy. I thought it was a joke. I thought whoever texted me that was joking with me because I never envisioned that really to happen. But 5 minutes later, I was, even though I had plugged it into the places I needed to and announced that because I wanted to. I was kind of done thinking about it and thinking I'm working on book 4 here, and I need to get this done, and that's what's important. And for me, it's important because I love to do it so much now that if I don't do it at least like 5 to 6 days a week, I feel like, I used to run marathons, and when I didn't go out for a run for a few days, I felt like a slug, right?
Yeah.
It's the same type of feeling that you're not doing what you should be doing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we hit on a lot is, it just kind of becomes who you are and it becomes part of you. And, like we use exercise a lot as a great metaphor for a lot of other things. And I track on a whiteboard right over here, I track my daily activities.
Mm-hmm.
And when I go for a run or when I go for a workout and whatnot, I highlight that. I write what it was and how long it took me or whatever. And on the days when I don't, I write that in a different color and it really stands out to me. So at the end of the month, I'm looking there, it's like, wow, I could have really done better.
Yeah.
That's just part of that personal debrief system that I have that to where it allows me to look forward to the next month and hopefully apply lessons learned from the previous month. And instead of taking a lazy day and just eating Cheetos, maybe go for a walk instead,
You guys have both lived lives that require a great deal of discipline. And writing's really no different. I think what's great for you is that coming from that world, that a lot of other writers may have not. You're used to having some self-discipline and to being organized and to being consistent in whatever it is you're doing, and that translates very well to writing.
Well, it's neat to hear you talk about the process, because a lot of the things that we do and a lot of things that we talk about on here are very process oriented things.
Yeah.
There are steps. And one of the things that jumped out to me as you were talking there, and I want to throw this out there and then we can unpack it as we go. But you said, I just enjoyed writing and I wanted to write this story, and I really didn't have any delusions of where this might go. But on the flip side of that same coin, do you have any, I don't know, can you speculate or talk about how important it is to have a goal and, maybe some, I don't know, some vision of, we talk about visualization a lot as a method to success. And, you have to see yourself. In the community that we grew up in, we used to use what we call chair flying a lot, where we had this mission in front of us and we would just sit in a room in a chair with our eyes closed and kind of go through it and just, walk ourselves through the stepping out to the jet and getting strapped up and take off, the different phases of the flight and how I'm going to react if this happens. And you kind of have that go on in your mind. That way, when it does happen for real, you're not completely blindsided by it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. It is important to have a goal, certainly in anything that you want to try to achieve. You need to set some goalposts and milestones and in your head, even if it's fairly innocuous or fairly just brief.
Ethereal.
It's not really a hardcore thing. But when I first started writing, long before I started writing, I was a reader, and I had consumed a great deal of mysteries and thrillers, espionage stories. I loved all of that. And there was a point in time, I remember distinctly, I was probably college age, and I probably told myself for the first time, I could do this. This is something I can see myself doing, that I could be good at. So my first goal was to learn as much as I could about writing, taking some creative writing classes, trying my hand at some things, seeing what I could turn out. Those were the immediate goals. Long-term goals of, being published or being on some list or winning an award was not on my radar at all, and it didn't need to be. But those other smaller goals, short-term goals, very much did need to be. And I think whether you write them down or put them on a whiteboard or you simply repeat them over and over in your head from time to time is essential for anything that you want to try to do.
Did you communicate that? Did you tell a bunch of people that you had a goal? Or so this is a thing though, right? Yeah, and it's one of these things. This is where I'm challenged. I talk to my wife about this all the time, especially recently, since I've been encouraged to try some new things. And I talk to my wife a lot about, I'm nervous to write it down because I've got a tremendous amount of imposter syndrome right now. And I know once I write that goal down, it's real.
Yeah.
And now when I write it down, dude, I'm all in with both feet. And it's, it's win or lose at that point. And so that's scary.
Right. It is scary. And you're right, though. It's that's the way to do it. I went through the same thing. I remember right before we got married, my wife and I, we've been married for 42 years already. And I've known her forever. So when I revealed to her that I want to be a writer, I remember the look on her face was like, okay, how do I appear to be supportive, yet at the same time that you still have to pay the bills? I mean, it was that look. And and that's why I think a lot of people hesitate to share that kind of dream with other people. Writing is something that, you tell people that I want to be a writer, and they kind of look at you with this glazed look like, yeah, okay. But what are you going to really do? Because, and they're not wrong. It's very tough to make a living at writing. Very, very tough. Even if you're very, very good and successful to the extent where you appear on bestseller lists and you win some awards. It's not to say it can't be done, but it is a long road to hoe. And but you're right. You have to be willing at some point to share that vision with others. And then I got to a point, much like you guys probably have as well, where you simply you become unafraid to say that and to share that with people. And I'm the opposite now. I can't wait to tell people that's what I do and that's what I want to continue doing, because I've proved to myself that I can be successful at it. And that's really the whole game.
Yeah, but
Bruce, I have a
Cass, that's
question.
something that we talk about too, is that vulnerability that he's talking about. You know,
Yeah.
when
No,
you're sitting there and you're just
That's-
consumed with self-doubt,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
and you know, you probably along the way somebody gave you a boost of confidence just enough to get you over the, you know, to the next paragraph or whatever it was. And that vulnerability though is what prevents us from being able to step out and really, you know, seize that moment for what it is.
I'll tell you a story that really illustrates that point. Have either of you guys ever seen the movie The China Syndrome?
No.
Okay, before your time. So made in the late 70s, I think. It was about a nuclear reactor meltdown. Michael Douglas is in it. Jane Fonda's in it.
Big
Extremely.
Trouble in Little China? Is that what you meant?
No, it's China Syndrome.
Hmm.
But really good movie, won some Oscars. When I got out of college, I decided I looked in the continuing edit catalog and I saw class in screenwriting. I didn't really ever think about writing a screenplay, but they didn't have a novel writing class, so I took it. And it was taught by the guy who wrote the screenplay for the China Syndrome. And it lasted for a full semester. He came out the first time and spent 3 hours telling us, this is the mechanics of a screenplay. Here's what you need to get to familiarize yourself with that. Start writing a screenplay. This particular date, you're going to turn it in. I'm going to review them all. I'll come back in December. We'll talk about them. He did that. He was going through the screenplays in class over the 3 hours. My name never came up. Never came up. And I was watching my watch going, oh, my mind was so horrible. He's not even going to cover it. So, but he was giving people very constructive criticism about, you know, things, and we had all kind of passed around each other's screenplays and had a sense of, you know, what he was talking about. And then 2 minutes before the class ends, he says, "Now, who is Bruce Borgos?" And I raise my hand, and he points at me, he goes, "Now you could do this for a living." So back to your point of somewhere along the line, somebody gives you that sense of validation, and it comes from a person who knows what they're talking about. And this guy was a very successful screenwriter. So that was all it took for me. I hung on to that piece of feedback for 30 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible, man. I wanted to ask you a question because, you know, we were talking about, yeah, dude, it can be really scary to put yourself out there, you know, to go through. I know Roscoe has talked to me about, you know, like you write something and you go to publish it and you put it out there and you're kind of like, you know, I hope it's good, right? You know, and it's just there. Sure. I mean, and I think that's natural, right? It's natural to have that fear, that imposter syndrome, that am I really good enough to be doing this? Question mark in your mind. And just to go back and piggyback a little bit on what you guys were talking about before, you know, I think sharing that is important when it's appropriate. I would kind of follow Bruce based on what you have shared, the way that you did it, in the sense of you were already dedicated to the task and the process. It was just when you felt comfortable sharing that. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't have that self-discipline and you need some accountability, then you need to share it sooner, right? Because that's how you can generate some accountability from people that you trust in your life. But what I'd like to ask you is, how'd you overcome that fear? Like when you're sitting there at the beginning and you're writing and you're like, man, this is such trash. Like there's no way anybody's going to read whatever it was that was going through. Because, right, we're all human. We all do that to ourselves. You know, especially if you're trying to make yourself better, you're going to have those conversations in your mind. So how did you overcome that? What was it that you did that just was like, that's okay. I'm just going to push forward. I'm going to do this.
So, Cass, the really honest answer to that is I never did completely overcome it. I have imposter syndrome all the time. I talk to my wife about it all the time. I sit in a room full of other authors. I was at the Poison Pen in Scottsdale a couple of weeks ago with Linda Castillo, who's a very, very successful author. I feel daunted in those situations. I feel inadequate very often. I know in my heart of hearts and in my brain that I belong in the room. I do that, but I have those doubts still. And like you said, I'm writing things every day, and sometimes I turn around and look at my screen. I go, "What is this crap?" But that is the process. And if going back to my earlier point about learning the craft of writing, anybody who's ever become anybody in this world in writing will tell you that you're not born a good writer. It's like learning to play basketball or learning to play the violin or the piano. You get better, or learning to be a fighter pilot. I mean, how many hours did you guys put in before you felt competent?
Yeah, a lot.
Or somebody else thought you were competent, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So those are things that are very human, very natural. I don't really want to overcome that feeling, quite honestly, because it keeps me driven to the extent that I'm always trying to learn more about the craft. I'm trying to study from people. And I think if I lost that, I might get a little too big for my britches.
Well, I think that's a great point, because I think what often happens is when people have large egos or assume that they've got it all wrapped up and they're just the best that there's ever been or whatever, right? Then they're not open to feedback. And then they're not open to those channels that exist that would actually help them improve and become even better than they are. And then they stagnate, or they fall off, or they're just never that good and they never get any better because they can't accept that feedback. So I think that that's a really important point. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, if I understand your story correctly, your 30-year break, you're doing something completely different. You decide, hey, I'm going to write something. It takes you about 10 years to get it together. But in that 10 years, I have to assume that that was like a huge investment in some ways in yourself, right? Like improving your writing abilities, actually taking that risk, having a little courage over comfort to put some stuff on a piece of paper or on a screen and start cobbling that story together, and then figuring out how to self-publish, like that whole process that you went through in that time. And what I wanted to ask you is, because you did that, because you went to task, you took the time, you put in the effort, you learned in the process, how did that create opportunity for you? Like, was that a defining thing that created opportunities for you then to become a published author down the road? Like, explain that process to me, and if it created opportunity.
Yeah, I think it probably did. I haven't reflected on that a lot, but I think you're right. Putting in that time, even sometimes as inconsistently as I did, and early on, I remember telling people I was writing a book, and I did that specifically because I wanted that to keep me with a
That was
goal
the
that
accountability
I
piece.
couldn't
Yeah.
surrender.
Yeah.
That's
That was
right.
accountability,
That's
right?
right. And I think that's important. Yeah. Yeah. Accountability, I think, is critical. So, it got me to the point where I was able to complete that first book. I churned out my next novel in less than 2 years and got it out there. And by that time, as soon as I released that on Amazon, I felt very strongly that I had improved enough in my writing to try to get traditionally published. So that became my goal. I was already starting to write what became my first traditionally published novel, The Bitter Past. That took me a much shorter time, and as fate would have it, it took a much shorter time, primarily because during COVID I lost my job, and at the time I just thought, maybe this is an opportunity. Don't go back out and start looking for another job, especially when nobody was hiring. put every effort you can into this. And in that next 6 months, I wrote 5 drafts of my book. And then, as we were talking about before we went on air, I invested in a private editor, which again, I think you go along this process. And as you learn more about the writing craft, you learn about the things that are important to writers, one of which is editing. And again, I didn't have an agent at that point. I wasn't being traditionally published, so I didn't have a copy editor or a developmental editor. I went out and invested in that person. And it was, for me, the best investment I ever made in my writing career. Bar none. Finding a good editor who could give me honest feedback, because, you're going to take your stuff out to people immediately in your lives, and they're going to kind of whitewash things typically for you to some degree. Some of them will be very honest, but a lot of people are afraid of hurting your feelings. This lady that I paid good money to wasn't afraid at all of hurting my feelings. She wanted me to be a better writer. So she helped me improve that manuscript to the extent that it made all the difference in me getting a literary agent and securing representation, which is essential if you're going to be traditionally published. You got to have a literary agent.
I love I've just been sitting back here listening to both of you guys, the questions and the answers, and what a great metaphor and a great line of parallel for everything else that we talk about. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you want to run a marathon, or if you want to save money to buy a house, or start a family, get married and start a family, or retire. It doesn't matter what the goal is. The process is almost always the same. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You have to put forth some effort, man. You have to have a plan. Yeah. And that last little bit that you were getting at there, I think that's really neat, how in 2020 you lost your job. And instead of looking at this as a woe is me moment, you look at this as a, hold up, man, this could be a pivot point. This might be somebody opening the door for me. Because, I mean, be honest, would you have pulled the trigger and gone full-time writer if you hadn't have lost your job?
No.
Maybe not, right? I mean, who knows? I mean, shit happens, right? But maybe not. And so that's, you need like this catalyst event to kind of push you over the edge in a lot of ways. Or in another way to frame it, open a door for you and help you see maybe what's on the other side, or present to you a decision point.
Yeah. It still scared me a lot, the prospect of not.
I could imagine it did.
not having that income immediately, and I had enough, after all these years stowed away in the bank. I knew I could subsist for a while. I think my wife was probably a little nervous about the prospect, but she bought in pretty quickly, especially as I started to secure representation, and my agent sold my book within 2 months of taking it out. Things happened very quickly for me, but only because, and I try to stress this with people I'm talking to about the process, only because I'd put in the time to learn the ins and outs of the industry as much as I could before that. Had I not studied how to, and taken some online classes about how to get a literary agent, I'd probably still be trying to do that. I'd be on my 200th rejection letter, which, is not uncommon in this world as people try to find an agent. But there's a very good chance I wouldn't be published to this day had I not spent the time learning as much as I could, not only about writing itself, but about the industry that writing lives in.
See, that's so there's two things I want to piggyback on around that, Bruce. So the first one was, do you mind if I ask you how old you were when you lost your job and made this pivot to full-time writing?
Yeah, I was 60.
So see, and that, dude, I think that's super powerful, and I'm going to tell you why, right? So many people, and we talk about this on the podcast, there are so many people that are so afraid to make a pivot, to change the place that they're in, because like you were saying, it's fucking scary, man. Yeah. I'm sitting here with no income coming in, not knowing what I'm going to do, hoping that this fucking works, right? And you have no guarantee that any of it's going to play out the way you're hoping it will.
No, you have no idea.
No, but you take a chance on yourself, right? And at 60 years old, brother, you make a pivot that I would imagine in some ways has transformed your life. Not just with the success that you've had, but dude, you're an author, like that dream that you had from coming out of college is in some ways fulfilled now, right? And you're actually getting to do at 60 years or 60 plus now what you want to do. Like, that is really fucking powerful.
Yeah, and it is. You're right. There is no looking back now. There is no substitute for the last 5 years of my life. I wouldn't trade that for anything. It allowed me to become what I wanted to become for all of those years. It's the realization every day that I have done what I set out to do, and you guys know something about that. Having that feeling, doing the things that you've done. But for me, that was a long time coming. I mean, I, like everybody else, went to work every day and had a job, and I thought I was pretty good at it, but it was never what I wanted to do. So when I decided to make that pivot, it was scary as hell.
Oh, I bet it was.
But and I guess I could have easily gone the other way, as I had for so many years already. But I was just kind of at that point thinking, look, if not now, when?
Yeah.
Like you said, it was a kind of an open window at that point. It kind of got handed to me, and I never did look at it as, oh, somebody just, did me something really bad. Well, I just thought, hey, I'm going to get on the phone with my financial advisor and figure out how I do this.
Yeah, well, I think at some point you either have to seize the opportunity or you have to let it pass you by, right? You have to you either have to answer the question of, no, I'm not good enough to do this, or live with the what if. What if I would have tried? What if I would have done X? And I can't live that way personally. I can't live in the what if world. I can take no all day long. I've had no, but I can't live with the what ifs in life. So, dude, I just think that that's really powerful about your story, that at the age of 60, you made, and just the ability to be in a place where you could have been overwhelmed with what was going on in life, but you still saw the opportunity and then went for it. That's courage over comfort. That's something we talk a lot about on the podcast. And that had to be a really vulnerable place as well, right? Like that, like you were saying, it's just, there had to be so much going on that was scary, but you were just like, we're going to give it a shot now. And I think that's awesome.
Quite honestly, Cass, I think what scared me more at the time was not doing it, not taking that chance, and having to ask myself the question later on, why didn't I do this? I mean, I'll never know whether I can do this. Because the longer you wait, the harder it is in anything. So, yeah.
Well, and I think what's great about your story too, because this is something that we try to stress, especially to some of the younger listeners that we have on the podcast too, is like, if there's something that you need to do to improve your ability to get to where you want to be, then go to task and do it, right? And sometimes it's not exciting. Sometimes it's not something great. Like, I'm going to take an online class on how to find a literary agent.
Right.
I'm sure that wasn't super exciting, or something that you were really looking forward to, right? Yeah, right. But it's just like we've talked about before, Roscoe, right? Like, dude, if you're in the IT world and you need a specific certification in order to be promoted and you're lollygagging around getting that certification, go get it done. Like, go do the things that you need to do, collect the information you need to collect. Don't just write a book and go, well, I wrote the book, so everything should fall into my lap now. That's not how it fucking works.
Well, so much of real life though, and unfortunately, nowadays with social media, I think people are sold a bill of goods about, easy, quick, instant, etc. And, and it's easy blank, quick blank, instant blank, whatever it is. But the truth of the matter is you got to put forth a lot of fucking work.
A lot of work.
You got to work at it. You got to put forth effort, and you have to invest in it a lot of times, whether it's money, time, some other resource, physical effort. If you want 6-pack abs, dude, you're going to have to cut your diet and you're going to have to go for some runs around the neighborhood. That's really what it comes down to. If you want to run a 21K Spartan race, you better get in and do some damn pull-ups.
Yeah,
you have
to get to a point in whatever it is you're trying to do where you invite the struggle. you invite the pain. In this case, you invite and sometimes relish in the rejection, because it only makes you stronger. It makes you better, because you can adjust. You can learn from those things. But it's a little masochistic, probably.
No,
But
it's spot on, man.
yeah, in my mind, I'm like, I love the suffering of writing, of sometimes sitting down for long periods and writing stuff that I don't think is very good, knowing in my head that I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix that. When I get to that part where I'm editing it, because I know I can do that. But you have to be a little bit in love with harming yourself, probably.
Well, but Bruce,
no,
what you haven't said in all that though is, I heard this a long time ago that really resonated with me, and it's helped motivate me in a lot of those periods of time. Exactly what you're talking about, where you're sitting there staring at a blank page, you kind of don't even know where to start. But somebody really smart that I look up to a long time ago, he said, "You can't edit what hasn't been written." Right?
That's right.
And that's so true though in everything. Like, Cass, you want to improve your half marathon time. Well, dude, if you don't go out and run a half marathon, you don't know what the benchmark is, and you can't go and work on that, and you can't start shaving off seconds at a time or half seconds at a time. And Bruce, if you don't write a sentence, you can't fix that sentence. And I mean and this goes into every single corner of our lives. And there's been already a lot of good takeaways in this for our listeners, but this is one of them. Is you got to fucking try. You got to do something so that you can figure out where you suck and you can fix it, so that the next iteration you suck a little bit less.
Yeah. And to get back to what you were saying specifically, Bruce, is you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Because you don't improve unless you do, right? Unless you're going to put yourself out there. You know Teddy Roosevelt's "Man in the Arena" speech? Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one of my favorites, and we talk about it on the podcast all the time.
Inspiring.
But that's exactly what you're talking about, right? Getting in the arena. It's not comfortable, man. It's not comfortable putting yourself out there. It's a very vulnerable place to be. And guess what? You're going to get bloodied. You're going to get dirty. You're going to get the shit kicked out of you sometimes, But you're never going to learn what you're really made of. You're never going to really learn about how to improve or make yourself better until you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more, man. It's a scary thing, but if you get to the point where you actually kind of enjoy that fear, and like I said, it never really fully goes away, and nor should it. I always want to feel a little bit inferior or a little bit unsure of my abilities. But one thing I tell new authors who ask me the question all the time is, I've never stared at a blank page. To your point, I knew early on, and I had done a lot of reading on how to write, how to learn the craft of writing from a lot of different people. So doing your homework, like you said, is essential. You've got to put in the time. You've got to learn what other people have, what their experience is, what their advice is. But I resigned myself early on to, hey, I'm going to churn out some really bad stuff, but I'm never going to have a blank page, because I'm just going to start writing. And that allows me to have the very secure feeling that, okay, a little bit of that is good. Some of that's very good. Some of it's not so good. I'll go back and fix it later on. But I just tell writers, don't worry about, and probably the worst thing that you can do, especially when you're starting out, is editing as you write. Don't write a chapter or half a chapter and then go back and start trying to fix it. Just belch it out, vomit the thing out, and knowing that, hey, the next draft, I'll go back, I'll make some changes. Eventually I'll get to a point where I want to share it with some beta readers or some people I trust, and they'll give me feedback, and I'll make some adjustments there. It's all a process. It all takes time. You have to be patient. But all of that pays big dividends down the line.
I think there's a lot of good importance in what you just said there about the editing as you go, and not being too critical of yourself in the moment. And because, and this is something, Bruce, that took me a long time to accept, and somebody helped convince me of this, and he's he's a sculptor in Indiana. I met him on a cruise a few months ago, and we sat up at the front of the boat for 3 or 4 days, just shucking and jiving and talking about it. He had this little watercolor book, and he was drawing pictures of the glaciers with his watercolors. And I heard his wife say something over the shoulder to him about, choosing that color or whatever. And he goes, actually, it's really easy because these are all sort of the same tones, and we just have to get the shading right. And I just leaned over and I said, hey, it's interesting how you're interpreting this with a pen, and I would interpret it with words.
Right.
And we started kind of this thing. And the one thing that, after spending 3 or 4 days with him, he helped me understand that what you do, what I'm trying to do, is art, and it's subjective, right? And some people are going to love it, and some people are going to hate it, and some people are going to be indifferent. And once I started thinking about it like that, and it really took me to a place of like, you know what, I'm going to write what I like, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And he helped me kind of turn that corner. At the same time, when you're talking about the process of doing it all, there is a bit of a process. However, I would submit that your process may not be the same as CAS's process, and that may not be the same as mine. So how important is it that you spend enough time to develop your own processes and your own techniques and your own how-tos?
Yeah, it's a huge thing. Your analogy is perfect. Writing is no different than sculpting. It's no different than painting. It's no different than being a musician. You are an artist. I don't use that term frequently when I describe myself. I really don't ever use it, but it is the same. And all of those people who are artists that we know of go through the same things that we as writers do, and they take the time to learn. They study under people. They practice. Writing's no different. If I think anybody who puts in 10,000 hours at anything, including writing, will be much better at that at the end of those 10,000 hours. I don't know how much time I've put in writing, but I know that I am much better at it now than I was even when I turned out my first and second self-published novels. It's just a natural growth that takes place. But you have to have your own process, whatever that may be, whatever you're comfortable with. And you kind of have to own it. That's yours. I hear writers all the time say you have to write every day. You should write every day. I don't write every day. I write 5 or 6 days a week typically. There are some times that because of things going on in life, I don't write for a week because and during that time, during that week, I don't stay up late when I want to go to sleep to get in my writing hours. I don't do that, but that's my process. I'm disciplined enough to get me back to the keyboard enough to where I'm pretty darn consistent, and I churn out a good amount of material any day that I'm sitting down there and typing things out. So all of that is very critical, and like you said, you just have to figure out what works for you and do it. You just have to continue to do it.
Yeah. We experienced this a lot in the professions that we had, where the book says do this, but man, there's like 15 different ways to do it. Yeah. Right. And you fly enough, you go on enough of these missions and you learn, well, CAS taught me this one way, and then Bruce taught me this other way, and then Roscoe taught me this other way. And I've tried all 3 of them, and none of them really work for me because, I don't know, my fingers don't work that way, or I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, or whatever it is. And you start to develop your own techniques over time.
Yeah.
Because the task has to get done one way or another. The task has to get done. Right. And it's just a matter of what's the best fit for you. And I think that just comes through time, trial, error, experience, putting in the practice reps, which it sounds like you've done a ton of. And, at the end of the day, you start to develop your own processes. And I'm sitting here as you're talking about, and you're kind of laying it out. I'm sitting here looking at, I got the Stephen King On Writing book right next to me, and his process is very different, and he's very, He's very, you should do this. You have to do this. You need to do this. Well, dude, I can't just sit down and crank out 3,000 words every day until I get a 150,000 word novel, right? That doesn't work for me because I still have a job and I still have a wife to take care of and a social life and, you know, all these other things, competing priorities. If you're a hermit that lives in the woods by yourself, maybe that works for you. But I think for a lot of people, you have to find what kind of fits in those gaps in your life. And, you know, maybe you have to reprioritize some of your daily activities to fit some of that in.
You do.
I know that, you know, with the different goals that I have going on and this year I've kind of got some fairly audacious goals that are kind of time sucks in a lot of ways. Like CAS, it takes a long goddamn time to go out and run 7 miles. You know, I mean, even as fast as CAS is, it takes a long time. That's a big chunk of your day that you have to, you know, you have to reshuffle the other priorities in your life, like taking your wife out to dinner or cleaning the house or, you know, spraying off the back porch or whatever it is, you know, and I think just the more that you do whatever it is you're doing, the more comfortable it becomes and the more you're able to splice that in to the rest of your life.
Yeah. You know, it's important because you guys are kind of touching on this subject of style. Everybody has their own style, and certainly that's true in writing as it is in anything else. You know, like anybody else who's managed to find some success in writing, has learned a lot from other authors and to some extent tried to emulate them. But at some point, you find your own voice, and that's whether again you're a painter or a sculptor or whatever. If you're writing, it's no different. You find your voice and your style. I've had a lot of people come up to me at bookstore events or other places and say things like, gosh, your writing reminds me so much of Craig Johnson or Nelson DeMille or whoever. And all those guys, you know, I love. But there was a point in my writing that I realized, okay, you don't want to try to sound like these other people on the page. They are already are writing their own successful stories. I don't want to be a copycat either. I just want to find the voice that I think is honest for me and something that is something that somebody else wants to read. And it might take a little bit of time, but if you stay true to that, then I think that helps you overcome some fears along the way too.
Yeah. Well, if I could take it one level deeper too, I think while you guys are describing finding your process and the process piece of it is important, I wonder if it's not really also understanding your strengths and weaknesses to a certain extent, right? And really knowing what you're good at and maybe what you're not so good at. And if that doesn't help you as you go through this process of learning how to write, find a more authentic voice, find a more authentic way of expressing a story that's different from maybe the people that you really appreciate or try to emulate. Does that make sense, Bruce?
It does, because here's a great example. There are a lot of authors, and we've all read them. You pick up a book and you start to read through the chapter, and there is so much detail about describing this area in the desert and the cactus that are there or whatever. And you before you realize it, you've read 3 pages and you're still getting the description of the cactus in the area. Now, that works for some people, and some people really enjoy reading that. I could never write that way because I'm not interested in that. I don't want to pretend to be. The few times that I tried that early on, I just felt that I was failing because it seemed too artificial to me, and it wasn't. I couldn't make it interesting enough. I realize that people are just going to start flipping through the very detailed stuff that I have. I found a happy medium there, but that took a while. But yeah, that's exactly what you have to do. You have to try certain things and figure out what you're good at doing, because you're not going to be good at everything.
The week before you were at the pen, I went out there to see Brad Thor. He just came out with his new novel, Edge of Honor. And during his interview, he said something I wrote down in my little book. And it was some advice that a editor or somebody had given him years ago, and it said, never start with the weather and cut out all the shit that people skim over. Right.
Exactly.
Well, what you were just talking about right there, when I sit down to read, like, and I'm talking about like the classic Clancy novels, right? Red October and Clear and Present Danger, that era of Clancy. I don't need to know where the rivet was oared out of the earth to build the battleship, right? Just tell me the battleship has big fucking guns and it's going to go blow shit up. That's good enough for me, but other people dig on that stuff, and that techno thriller, that is a subgenre that some guys just get off on that. Gun nerds get off on Jack Carr and how he describes every widget of gear on the M4. He'll go over on an entire page just describing the setup on the M4 of the guy and the capabilities of the night optics and all this shit. Well, that's great, man. But just tell me he's got nods and a 5.56 rifle, and let's go kill some people. Right. That's more my style. Now, I think there's a time and a place to be very descriptive, especially if it's, something like you write, you're writing some desert scenery. Well, for somebody on the East Coast, they might appreciate you describing what those mountains look like and the topography and stuff. And, I write about fighter jets. And so some of the technology that's wrapped up in, the missiles that we shoot or the stealth technology or something, but I'm not going to get so far into it that it just bogs everything completely down, And,
you're right. And I have that in my mind all the time when I'm writing, because what I'm describing physically, especially outdoors, is an area of the country that not a lot of people who live, east of here are typically familiar with. So it's important to get some feedback along the way in your writing, which is why I use beta readers primarily, is to give me a sense of, did I do too much? Did I do too little in these areas? And have gotten enough feedback now to where I feel comfortable in describing things to the extent that I do, because I've had not only my beta readers, but regular, normal readers tell me a lot now that, oh, you paint such a vivid picture for me. I could see it. I could see it as a movie. And that tells me that, okay, I'm doing enough of that, and I'm satisfying my own need not to do too much of that, because it would bore me as a writer to do too much of that. To write, like you said, to describe a gun like Jack Carr does, hats off to him, because he can make it interesting. I probably could never do that, and I just don't want to. So
he's got a talent for it, and you know what? His readers like it. And when Ray Porter's reading it, listen, I'll listen to Ray Porter read the freaking dictionary, man. That dude's what an amazing talent. But he could read the phone book, and I would listen to it. I'd buy that shit on Audible twice and leave a 5-star review. But from your lips to God's ears, this is where I was going with all that, was the feedback mechanism. And as well as I do that nothing will humble you down more than getting your manuscript back from an editor. And I'm pretty sure my last book that I self-published, I'm positive there was more red on the page than there was black on the page when I got it back from her. But you know what, Cass? We talk about feedback a lot. We talk about giving feedback. We talk about receiving feedback. And man, you just have to put that ego in a fucking shoebox in the closet and accept it for what it is. You asked for this, Bruce. You sent me the manuscript and I've got the red pen. You asked for this. Now I owe it to you. I owe it to me, first of all, because it's my profession as an editor. And I owe it to you to make you a better writer and to make this story pop the way that I know that it can. But the onus is on you to accept it.
Yeah, and to want it. Like I said, you have to crave feedback if you're really going to seriously get into this, because if you're really intent on being successful, that it will take feedback for you to become better. So the faster I can get it, the quicker I'm going to be better. And I'm perfectly willing to put my ego on the shelf and have people hammer away at me and to give me their reasoning why something doesn't work. Because the worst thing that you can do, and I know writers struggle with this, especially when they're starting out, is they're so afraid to either hire an editor or to use beta readers because they don't want anyone outside their family slamming them. It's too much for them. I've had people come to me, and literally I had one woman who was trying to get an agent, and she had written a query letter and was not having success with it. I said, I'll be happy to look at it and give you my feedback. She had been self-published for a long time and pretty successful, much more successful than I had been at self-publishing, but she was still wanting to break into traditional publishing. So I looked at her query letter. I marked it up with a red pen, just like you described, Roscoe. And I sent it back to her, and I said, here's all of the things that are wrong with it. Here's the things that are okay with it. And she said, wait, are you suggesting that I rewrite this letter? And I said, not only am I suggesting you rewrite it, I said, I would rewrite it 10 times. I would rewrite it as many times as it took to make it perfect before you send it out again. And I could just hear the reluctance in her voice. She was like, oh, well, okay. And then she never did rewrite it. And she's just back to self-publishing now. And that's fine if it, I know it's not what she wants to do, but she was not willing to really take in that constructive criticism and do something with it. It was too damaging for her, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it comes down to mindset, right? Like, do you want to be better or do you want to be better? Because those are your options, right? And you can either take offense to it, or you can look at things objectively and logically as just feedback that you can then assess and determine if you want to act on it or not, and if it's valid or not, depending on the source, and then make some changes, move forward, and keep learning, right? That's, at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's still about learning. It's still about figuring out the process and how to do it correctly and all that stuff. But people they get their egos in the way, and they get an inflated sense of self or an inflated idea about themselves and their own capabilities. And it prevents them from being able to move forward in so many situations.
And I've never met, here's how irrational that fear is. I've never met anybody in publishing or writing whose criticism was not meant to help you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all anybody's trying to do is help you.
Yeah.
So why would you be afraid of that? It might hurt initially to have somebody tell you, I don't think your manuscript is ready. Or maybe I don't think you tell a very good story, at least the way you have it. But that's a starting point, and they're not trying to land you. They're trying to be honest with you.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
How do I make it better? Instead of well, fuck you, I'm going to the next guy. Then, well, I mean, what's your advice then? Yeah. Well, I need you to delete everything after page 1 and kind of start over. Well, okay. I mean, so wait a minute. The words chapter 1 were okay. Okay, I got something to go.
I'm good. I got to
start. So Bruce, though, this is going nicely down a neat path here. So, you started out, you kind of didn't know where it was going to go, but you had a goal. All right, great. So I'm going to start putting words on paper. We're going to see what happens. You invested a lot of time, effort, energy, money into it, and you're willing to put your ego aside and learn new things and put yourself out there. At what point do you think when you submit this to a beta reader, or maybe not even to an editor yet, maybe you take the first draft over to your wife and you say, hey, will you just give this a courtesy look and make sure, I dotted I's and crossed T's. At what point are you proud of it?
Quite honestly, and maybe this is the kind of ego you have to have as a writer to keep doing it. I'm proud of it the moment I start writing it, the first draft. I'm proud of it because I know I've proved this to myself. But even back when I first started doing it, I had that feeling early on. I think you have to have a sense as a writer. You have to have enough of an ego, enough conceit to really believe in yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have doubts along the way. You don't feel like an imposter sometimes. But you have to have some conceit. just like I imagine, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, you go out to fly a very high-tech plane in the Air Force, you have to believe that you have the capability of doing that. And if you don't, you're never going to succeed. So I know in my heart that, and in my brain, that I'm proud of it right out of the gate. Now, that does not mean that I don't think there's a long way to go, because there always is. But I I make myself believe that, and I'm glad that I learned that early on, because self-doubt can effectively kill you in whatever you're trying to do if you let it take over you. But that is not my problem.
Yeah,
No, I think there's a lot of truth to that, man. If you have to have some confidence in your capabilities. I think there's a fine line between confidence and cockiness.
Yep.
And it can be a difficult line to navigate sometimes. But yeah, absolutely, you do. You have to have at least confidence in yourself that you can do this. You may not be great at it yet, but you can still do it, right? You can take the feedback, you can learn, you can figure out the process.
Yeah, you can be confident and humble at the same time.
You can. Yep, you certainly can. Go ahead, Roscoe. I think you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say exactly that. I think that, there's a balance. When you look at this as a total process from start to finish, like sitting down and writing 90,000 words, that's an accomplishment, man.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that takes months to do.
Right.
And
it takes me a year to write a book.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time when you add up all the hours of research and internet browsing and YouTube videos and other books that you're reading so that you can get a better feel for it, and jotting down outlines and keeping notes in a little notebook, and then actually sitting down and typing out the words. By the way, I don't know how to type, so it really fucking sucks, right? So when you add all that up to 90,000 words, man, it comes out to months of your life. And so when you get to type the end at the end of it, that's an accomplishment. And you want to go out and celebrate with a beer or a scotch or a cigar or whatever, a high five to your wife. But at the same time, you know that you're only maybe a quarter of the way there. Like, this has got to go through a lot of other wickets, right? So this is something that you said very early on that I jotted down on my notes over here when we were talking about you hitting the bestseller list, which, congratulations, that's quite the accomplishment.
Thank you.
Especially on your third book, man, that's huge. But I'm curious at, how hard is it for you to really enjoy the dub when you get it and be in that moment versus looking at how much other work you have left to do? Like you said it yourself, you're like, I'm already working on book 4, man. And I know I experienced this. My first book over here over my shoulder, No New Lessons, briefly hit a bestseller list on Amazon. Yeah. And I was ecstatic for about 5 minutes. Right. And then I was like, okay, now what? Like, that was my goal. I met my goal. What's next? Yeah, and that's something I know personally in my life, man. I try to do a lot of introspection on me, and that's something I really need to work on is, man, just enjoy this moment for a moment, take this and really have fun with it. And then, that other stuff, it'll come.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Enjoy the moment for a moment. Because you can't dwell on it. You can't look at, popping onto a bestseller list, which you could very easily just pop off just as fast, and think, okay, well, this is it. This is the golden ticket. I don't need to do anything else. I'm there. You just can't do that in any endeavor. It's never going to work out for you if you do that. So you just have to keep grinding away and telling yourself, I'm not good enough yet. I mean, and I don't ever want to really get to that point where I feel complacent about what it is I'm doing, and feel like, gosh, I know everything I need to know, or I'm as good as I'm ever going to get. I hope I never get there. So yeah, I'll enjoy those moments as they come, and I'll have a beer with you guys when I see you, and we'll talk about it and those kinds of things. But that's as far as I typically allow myself to enjoy it. Because it's so fleeting.
Yeah. Well, I think what's important about what you said there too, Bruce, is that it's this whole process is a continuously improving process. Like you're never really done getting better. You're never really done honing your craft. you're never really done learning about, how you can do things better or more efficient, or right. And that applies to everything too that we talk about, Roscoe, right? Whether it's you're working on yourself, whether it's you're working on relationships, whether it's you're working on work, whatever it is you're working on, it is never over. It is, and if you think that at some point you're just going to reach a peak and be like, hey, I made it, you're a fucking idiot, because that's just not how it works, man. I mean, there's always ways to improve. There's always ways to get better. So,
well, it's like what the great Colonel Sanders said.
Piece.
The great Colonel Sanders said that success is not owned; it's just rented, and rents due every day.
That's right. Rents due every day.
I'm kidding. That was J.J. Watt, and he probably stole it from somebody else. But El Diablo over here. Yeah, that's great. The hard part, I think, is, naturally, as when you put that much effort into something, you want to be proud of it. You want to be happy, right? And like, I look at, I mean, you can take this even to raising kids. And Cass, we've had this discussion too. You're proud of where your kids are, but they're not finished. And you're never done being a parent. You're constantly polishing those edges a little bit here and there. And I got from almost 29 years old all the way down to 20-ish, 21-ish. And man, I know that there's still some rough corners out there that I got to keep sanding on as a dad. And every week I call my mom, and she still parents me. So it's no different than any other process or any other thing in your life. But, when you look at it, when you step back and you look at your journey of, kind of where you started and now where you are, what changes for the next iteration, and how do you continue to bump out those goalposts a little bit and keep edging that goal a little further down the line so that it keeps you motivated?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you start to think about those things every step of the way, especially as you start to get some recognition, and you feel very, very rightly that, okay, what's next? How do I capitalize on this and continue to grow and make the most of whatever this recognition is? So, like, for instance, last week when this came up on the USA Today bestseller list, I'm thinking about, my instant thoughts were, okay, what do I do? What do I need to do to take advantage of this? I consulted with my publisher a little bit on that, and the marketing person at the publishing house, and they gave me some advice. So again, you're always looking for advice. What do I do here? What's the best thing? This is new to me. I hadn't gotten that kind of recognition before. And then, how does that reposition me potentially for what I'm doing next? And knowing that I can achieve this kind of recognition now, how do I make sure I get that on the next book? Are there things that I can do? Whether it's social media promotional stuff or website improvement. Those are all things that, as writers, if we want to be successful out there, for the most part, 99% of us anyway, have to do those things, which also occupy your time, are not necessarily pleasant to spend time on, but they're essential to improving you as a writer and your position as a writer. You could be the best writer in the world. If nobody knows who you are, it's not going to matter much. If your goal is to really, help, people's lives. My goal as a writer, I always tell people this, and I don't know whether they believe me or not. My sole goal as a writer is to have my book move you to either tears or laughter or both. That's what I strive to do. And I know that when people give me the feedback and they say that I did my job. That's all of the reward I need. Quite honestly, I'm not kidding. I don't need any other recognition. The other stuff is nice because, I want to sell more books because that means I reach more people and I can have that same kind of impact on them. But that's my selfish goal there, is I want to reach more people to make more people feel that way. And that's it. So I will do whatever is necessary for me to do that.
That's cool. The way that you frame that there at the end, that's really neat. One of the things that one of the bedrocks of our podcast and our platform is giving back.
Yeah.
And, influencing others and mentorship, which you've been kind enough to be a mentor to me. And I greatly appreciate that. And this will lead me into gratitude here in a second, which I know that you have a lot of, and I definitely do, but, that can't be lost, that, when you get to a certain point, whether it's through your journey or when you actually reach success, you have to reach back or reach out and look for those opportunities to share some of that information. And that goes down to, at the core fundamental reason why we started this podcast in the first place was to give back to other people and to share these experiences that Cass and I have through the pressure cooker of growing up in a fighter squadron and doing some of the shit that we did, and I remember that discussion that we had on the phone. He was in Austin and I was here, and it was we started talking about, man, what a shame it would be for us to go to our grave with all this experience and not share it with anybody else.
Yeah.
It's stuff like we were exposed to things, Bruce, that normal people just aren't exposed to. These really high intense, just pressure cooker literally life or death situations, riding a fucking rocket through the sky, shooting rockets at other rockets in the sky. And we did it every day for 20 plus years, and I would venture to guess that not a lot of people on the planet are subject to that. Right. And so that's what it came down to for us. Right. And so when I hear you talk about, the giving back and the making people feel that feeling, and like laughter is the best medicine, man. So yeah, if you can get people to laugh or have some sort of emotional response to what you wrote, man, bravo, mission accomplished. Now flip that on its head. And how important is it, do you think, for you to actively seek out mentorship of your own and to provide mentorship to other people, which again, thank you for being one of those guys in my corner. But do you think that that's like a key ingredient to this whole freaking thing that we've been talking about for an hour and 16 minutes?
I do. I'm not sure if everybody would agree with me. Everybody has their own journey, but for me, a huge part of that journey has been both of those things. Being a mentor for people where you can be, and seeking mentorship out really wherever you can find it. I am so sometimes unsure of my own abilities that, and I say that only because, and you guys will know the feeling, you pick up a favorite author's book and you start reading, and within the 3 chapters or 3 paragraphs, you're going, God damn it,
I suck.
Yeah, I suck.
Why do people even read my books?
Every day.
Right.
Hey, so I picked up a book recently that I had this discussion with myself about. I need to rethink my life choices.
That's the thing, you don't. And when I, having those feelings as I do, I try to surround myself with good people, smarter people than me. Like we hear about in every aspect of life, surround yourself with good people. That's what I try to do. So when I go to a writer's conference or I communicate, I use social media primarily to reach out to other authors and learn from them. And then sometimes I establish a relationship with them. We'll end up on the phone like this, and we'll start, exchanging ideas, and they'll let me pick their brain. I mentioned to you before we went on, I went out to the Poison Pen at Scottsdale with Linda Castillo, who just, she's so much better than me. And she's on her 39th book, for God's sake. I don't even know how that's possible. But we sat down over dinner, and she let me pick her brain. And I asked her about all these things that I didn't know enough about. And so that kind of mentorship and seeking advice on a constant basis, I think is super critical, because again, if you want to get better at anything, you want to learn, you have to learn from other people. It's not enough to pick up a book on how to write, whether it's Stephen King's book or anybody else's. It's not going to be enough. You need to hear it from other people and to take what you can from them. And then as a result, when people come to me, I feel a huge responsibility to give that back in whatever way I can, and just to tell them very honestly, look, you may not really believe in yourself yet, but you should. You should start believing that. And here's how you can do that. And yeah, you just held up that book by Stephen King. Um,
Yep.
Here's how you go about that process. Start learning, do these things, practice, practice, practice. And I tell them all the time, just like I told you, you come back to me whenever you need me. I will be here for you, because it's a journey, and it's a long road for most of us. It's not a quick one, and that shouldn't scare you. Hopefully, you'll kind of fall in love with that. But if you have the patience, and you're willing to learn, good things will come.
Well, dude, I spent 21 years in a fighter squadron. I know a thing or two about getting my nuts crushed in for long periods of time. But I held this book up because as you were talking, I just wanted to say that, you said it's not enough to read a book, and that's probably true. Yeah.
Right.
And my point with that was seek out other sources. Don't rely on just a single source for your information, be it, a single book, or this is not the only book that I have about writing or the process or the people. But, CAS, like, back in the day when, there you go, back in the day when we were when we were growing up in a squadron, you didn't just go to one person for all the information. You sat in the bar and you talked to 4 or 5 different people, and then the next day you sat in the bar and you talked to 4 or 5 more.
Well, and the key is
that's how you learn.
You didn't learn it. You didn't learn it by yourself, right? You didn't read 3-1 and then go out and execute tactics perfectly. Like, you learn from all the guys around you day
and you
in
learn
and
from
day
failure
out.
too.
Sometimes
there are very few Beethovens in the world, or Mozarts,
right.
who start cranking things out on the piano when they're 2 years old. Those people are not people; they're
few and far between.
Yeah, I mean, come on. You have
Those
to
are the extraterrestrials among us. I'm convinced of it. The Men in Black, man, that shit's real.
Area 51, yeah.
I mean, people get struck by lightning, get superpowers all the time. I'm just saying.
I would like to say, though, I would like to just say thank you, Bruce, for doing that. Like, thanks for being a mentor for other people, because it's so important. And I don't think it gets done very well in a lot of situations. I'm not familiar with the writer's world, so I don't, it may be prevalent there, but I think in a lot of situations, people don't look for opportunities to extend themselves to mentor, or don't want to spend that time or give that effort, or in some respects, maybe give the secrets that they think that they have, right? And so, my hat's off to you for doing that, especially for Roscoe, because he's a fucking handful, man.
I know. I can be a real pain in the ass.
Jesus Christ.
It's, it always, you talk about self-doubt and all that stuff. Anytime I text somebody that I've recently connected with and I have a question and they don't immediately reply, I automatically think, oh God, I pushed too much. They think I'm a fucking stalker. They're, I'm off their list. I'm not getting a Christmas card.
You just got to do it.
But something that, Cass, what you were saying is not enough people do it. I'd say that I've seen 2 extremes, right? I've seen the people who are hell yes, call me anytime, and then I've seen the other people that just won't return your phone calls or won't engage. Very few that are in between that try to half-ass it, or well, okay, this is the 3rd time he's emailed me, let me answer him. Very few of those. So I have found that people are either all in or all out on that. And thanks to the people who have been all in, and like you, Bruce, like you talk about, you reach out on Facebook. That's how I've met several of the people that I'm in communications with now, and trying to learn as much as I can about the whole thing is. And we just did an episode about 2 or 3 episodes ago. We did an episode on mentorship, and we talk a lot about what it is and, who might be a good mentor and da-da-da. But that one, we really broke down into how to do it. Like, sometimes you just got to cold call people, and sometimes you got to be the pain in the ass, because, man, I tell you what, you're a busy person. Right. Yeah. I mean, you're a USA Today bestseller, and you're out there doing the circuit, and you're posting all the Facebook things that I heard you tell somebody in the pen that it took you like an hour to make one of those posts. Yeah. Right. So, but you're out there doing the thing. And here I am, just a nobody who's trying to get 5 minutes of your time. And you have to be persistent about that, because it's way easy for Bruce to say, you know what, I'll talk to Roscoe later. I'm doing something. I'll talk to Roscoe later. And if Roscoe doesn't circle back and take the ownership for his own shit, then that loop never gets closed because you forget about it. You move on and you go do your spot on the Today Show or whatever it is.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very important point when you are trying to do these things and you're cold calling people. You're trying to make some early contacts, initial contacts with people, and develop some relationships so that you can get some knowledge. Nobody is going to care more about your future than you are.
Bingo.
So if you're not willing to be the pain in the ass and risk being a pain in the ass, you're probably not going to be very successful because, yeah, you might tick a few people off and you might rub a few people the wrong way. But you know what? Overwhelmingly, my experience has been you will find people who just absolutely would love to spend the time with you and talk you through whatever is on your mind. They just, because they've been there themselves, they know they didn't get there by themselves. So they're usually pretty darn good about giving back.
Bingo. That's the gratitude, Cass.
Yeah.
That's that attitude of gratitude that I was wanting to get to. And we've got a couple other authors that I've reached out to recently who have some level of success, and every one of them has said the same thing. Like, hey man, I remember being there. I remember being in those shoes, and I remember seeking out people to just have a 5-minute conversation with me. And, now's their opportunity. And I experienced it when I retired from the military. Cass, I know you did too, about how, you're turning this corner in your life into a new chapter, and it's a blank page and you really don't know what's out there. And I had a mentor. I had a guy help me out. And I asked him, hey man, can I just come to your house and buy you a bottle and just say thank you? And he goes, no, dude, you'll get your chance. And when it's your chance, you just give it back.
That's right. Exactly. Yep. Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah. Cass?
I don't have anything else, man.
All right. So here we go. We talk about, I'm the king of this, Bruce. I screw things up every day and I debrief myself and I try to learn. I mispronounced your name in the first 10 seconds of this podcast. Will you please pronounce your name for me?
Yeah, my last name is pronounced Borgos, but I seldom correct people about it because it's not a big deal. And because of the way it's spelled, most people, even if they've said it a number of times, aren't going to get it right. So I just tell people it rhymes with gorgeous. It's easier.
There you go.
Kind of a mnemonic device, but it's not a big deal at all.
How can people find you, Bruce, if they want to find you?
Well, they can certainly go on my website, which is bruceborgos.com, BORGOS.com. And they can find me on Facebook or Instagram or even X, unfortunately, under my name. Because there are, as I said, there are social media platforms which are, you better stay in your lane because there are people who are, they must spend their entire lives trying to ruin yours. So you got to be careful about some of those things, but you can pretty much find me anywhere. You can get in contact with me from my website. You can send me an email, easy stuff. So I'm always willing to talk to people.
And are your books that have been published, are they a series or are they standalone?
Yeah, so the books that I self-published are standalone. But when I wrote The Bitter Past, the book that was published in 2023, the publisher immediately, when they decided they wanted to buy it, they told my agent, "Well, this is going to be a series, right?" And when my agent told me that, I said, "Well, yeah, it's going to be a series.
Of course,
of course it is."
So here's a quick funny story. So when we were on the phone the first time with the guy who eventually became my editor at the publishing house, he said, "Could you, in the next 20 minutes, just crank out a chapter, or not a chapter, a paragraph on each of the next 3 or 4 books to give us some idea what you have in mind?" And of course, I had nothing in mind.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I did it, and
no pressure.
They actually worked for the next couple of books. They didn't hold me to those descriptions, but it worked out. And yeah, so this is a series that I'm currently writing. The Blue Horse is the 3rd in the series. I'm almost done with the 3rd draft of the 4th book, which will be out next July, hopefully. And we'll see where it goes from there because I'm at the end of my contract now. Originally, it was a 2-book contract, and it became another 2-book contract. I'm feeling pretty good about where we are right now, so I hope that my publisher is going to want to continue that. But it all comes, it's a financial decision. It's they're looking at those things from a different perspective than I am.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a very good relationship with those guys, and I enjoy the working with them. So I hope that continues. But I've got some other, ideas and books in my head and on my computer that I can start working on.
Right on, man.
That's awesome, dude. Well, best of luck to you.
Yeah,
and
thanks for coming on, Bruce. It was great to meet you.
Great meeting you too.
Yeah. I'll see you in September at BoucherCon in New Orleans.
Yeah, about a little less than 6 weeks, I guess. How about 5 weeks?
Yeah. I got work to do.
Just bring your very light cotton clothes, man, because it's hot and humid there in August.
Oh no, I grew up down south, so that's like going back home for me.
Yeah.
My wife and I are already talking about. Well, we did half of our anniversary. We did it in New Orleans down on Bourbon Street. And we were laughing the other day about where the hotel is, and it's walking distance to all the cool places down there and all that. And he said, "Hey, the last time we were here, we were like 23 years old, so probably not going to be the same experience."
Yeah.
We'll see.
Find some good music though, and something good to drink. And
yeah. Well, I'm gonna come with my best crop top and get me some beads while I'm down there. Damn it!
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I expect to see you dancing down there.
Yeah, well, that's something that I don't do, Bruce.
Take pictures for me, please.
Everybody should know their limitations. And sorry, man, I'm a white boy from Alabama. No dancing here.
Well, and I guess my last question for Bruce would just be: now that you know that he's a white boy from Alabama, do things make more sense?
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah. Especially since I mispronounced his name, and Cass, you beat me to it when I was going to say I'm the proud product of the Alabama public school system. That's why I can't read so good. But I say things like they're spelled, and by God, if I can say it, spell it, and use it in a sentence, it's a word. And
I hear you.
Sometimes I write things, and I'm like, who the hell is this? Like, that's great. All right. Well, thanks, Bruce. Thanks for coming on, man. I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of it, and it was super good. Like one of the best things for us always is we've interviewed best-selling authors, we've interviewed Thunderbirds, we've interviewed astronauts on this show, and every one of them say the same things. They just use different words, and it's all about the process, and it's all about the hard work, and it's all about all these little ingredients that we stacked up over the last hour and a half. I'm happy to hear that this is just one more validation that we talk about on the show about, hey man, put your head down, set a goal, get a plan, execute the plan.
Well, it's great advice that you guys are giving your listeners, and I really appreciate you having me on. So you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Yeah, you have a powerful story, Bruce, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us.
You got it.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. We'll be in touch. Cass, be the one.
Be the change.
Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website, and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.